Welcome to our Regulation Mastery session. In this session, we will continue reading the CSSF Circular 22-806 from Part 2, Requirements, in the context of ICT Outsourcing Arrangements, Chapter 2. 142, Management of Outsourcing Risks. A. In line with point 35, the resource operator shall retain the necessary expertise to effectively monitor the outsourced services or functions on a cloud computing infrastructure and manage the risks associated with the outsourcing. Moreover, the resource operator shall ensure that staff in charge of cloud computing resources management, including the cloud officer, have sufficient competencies to take on their functions based on appropriate training in management and security of cloud computing resources that are specific to the cloud computing service provider. B. As set out in points 66 to 70, a risk assessment of outsourcing arrangements shall be carried out by the in-scope entity. The risks specific to the use of cloud computing technologies shall also be part of this assessment and encompass, e.g., isolation failure in multi-tenant environments, the various legislations that are applicable a country where data are stored and country where the cloud computing service provider is established, interception of data in transit, failure of telecommunications, e.g. internet connection, the use of the cloud as shadow IT, the lack of systems portability once they have been deployed on a cloud computing infrastructure, or the failure of continuity of cloud computing services. C. Any change in the application functionality by the cloud computing service provider, other than the changes relating to corrective maintenance, shall be communicated prior to its implementation to the resource operator, who shall inform the in-scope entity, so that they may take the necessary measures in case of material change or discontinuity. D. Any change in the application functionality managed by the resource operator, other than the changes relating to corrective maintenance, shall be communicated to the in-scope entity prior to its implementation, so that the latter may take the necessary measures in case of material change or discontinuity. E. The in-scope entity and the resource operator shall have full awareness of the continuity and security elements remaining under their responsibilities when using a cloud computing solution. F. The in-scope entity shall understand and the resource operator shall control the risks linked to a cloud computing infrastructure. G. The in-scope entity and the resource operator shall know at any time where their data and systems are located globally, be it production environments or replications or backups. 143. Contractual clauses. A. The outsourcing agreement signed with the cloud computing service provider shall be subject to the law of one of the member states of the EEA. In the case where the outsourcing agreement signed is a group contract aiming at allowing the in-scope entity, as well as other entities of the group to benefit from the cloud computing services, the contract may also be subject to the law of the country of the signing group entity, including when this country is outside the EEA. B. The outsourcing agreement signed with the cloud computing service provider shall provide for a resiliency of the cloud computing services provided to the in-scope entity in the EEA. In this way, in case of spread of processing, data and systems over different data centers worldwide, at least one of the data centers shall be located in the EEA and shall, if necessary, allow taking over the shared processing, data and systems in order to operate autonomously the cloud computing services provided to the in-scope entity. If all data centers backing the cloud computing services are located within the EEA, the resiliency requirement for the cloud computing services in the EEA is by default fulfilled. In the case where the outsourcing agreement signed is a group contract aiming at allowing the in-scope entity, as well as other entities of the group outside of the EEA, to benefit from the cloud computing services, the resiliency in the EEA is not mandatory, but recommended and should be considered in the in-scope entity's risk analysis. C. The in-scope entity may submit, as part of its notification, a request for a specific derogation to the competent authority, where the requirements laid down in points A and B above cannot be fulfilled in case of an outsourcing of a critical or important function. This request shall be supported by detailed arguments justifying the use of this cloud computing service provider, and stating precisely the resiliency measures planned in case of this service provider's failure or failure of connections allowing access thereto.